In the city of Asaba, there lived a wealthy businessman, Mr. Thompson, and his wife. They had two beautiful daughters, Clara and Rita, who were the center of their universe. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson loved their daughters dearly and provided everything they needed. However, there was one thing that Mr. and Mrs. Thompson were very particular about: they never allowed Clara and Rita to go out and mingle with their classmates or friends. No parties, no sleepovers, no visiting friends' houses. The only places they were allowed to go were school, home, and church. Their parents were devout Christians and wanted their daughters to grow up with strong Christian values. So, every evening, after school, the driver would take Clara and Rita to church for evening prayers. They would come back home, do their homework, and go to bed. Clara and Rita weren't happy about this arrangement, though. They longed to go out and have fun like their classmates. They wanted to experience life beyond the confines of their home, school, and church. But their parents were strict, and they knew better than to disobey them. One day, as they were getting ready for church, Clara turned to Rita and sighed, "I wish we could just go out and have some fun for once. You know, go to the mall, club, and hang out with friends." Rita nodded in agreement. "I know, right? It's so boring just going to school, church, and home every day," Clara continued, "and it's not like we're asking for much. Just a little freedom to live our lives would be nice." Rita whispered, "But what can we do? Mom and Dad are so strict." Clara and Rita's parents were always in touch with their pastor, calling him constantly to ensure their daughters attended evening prayers. The pastor became very fond of them and would call their parents if he didn't see Clara and Rita at evening prayers. Sometimes, if they arrived late, he would call their parents to complain. Clara and Rita weren't happy about their parents' constant communication with the pastor, always asking about their whereabouts. They decided to come up with a plan to reason with the pastor, hoping he could help them get what they wanted. One day, they sat in the sitting room, discussing their plan. Rita was hesitant. "I don't think this is a good idea. Remember, the pastor is a man of God." But Clara was determined. "Pastors these days are not like those of olden days. They can be influenced by money." Rita raised an eyebrow. "You mean we can bribe him?" Clara nodded. "Why not? We can use our parents' money to keep him quiet. And as for our driver, a bottle of wine should do the trick." Rita thought for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, maybe we should try." They both nodded in agreement, then went back to their bedrooms, already thinking about their next move. The next day, their driver brought them home from school, and towards 4 p.m., they prepared for church. As they were getting ready in the bedroom, Clara asked Rita, "So, are we still going to do what we discussed earlier?" Rita replied, "Why not? We're going to do exactly what we said." Clara nodded, "But we're not going to tell our driver yet. Maybe after we've talked to the pastor, we can figure out what to do with him." Rita agreed. "We can just tell our parents that we can take care of getting to church on our own. We don't need the driver's services anymore." As soon as they arrived at the church for evening prayers, they told one of the workers to inform the pastor that they wanted to speak with him. The worker delivered the message, and the pastor asked them to come into his office. Clara and Rita went into the pastor's office, and he greeted them warmly. "Ah, my dear Clara and Rita, daughters of the renowned billionaires, please, sit down." They sat down, and the pastor asked, "What seems to be the matter? Is there something troubling you?" Clara and Rita exchanged a nervous glance before Clara began to speak. Clara began, "Pastor, we've noticed that you're always in communication with our parents, asking if we attended evening church services." The pastor nodded. Yes, my dear. That's true. We're always in touch." Clara looked at Rita, then back at the pastor. "Please, Pastor, can you help us? Can you do us a favor?" The pastor's curiosity was piqued. A favor? What could that be? Did you offend your parents in any way? Do you want me to talk to them? Clara shook her head. No, no, sir. That's not it. We didn't offend our parents. We just need your help with something. The pastor leaned forward, interested. Okay, go ahead with your request. I'm all ears. Clara took a deep breath and continued. It's just that, we don't really associate with our classmates or friends. We don't go to parties or hang out with our mates. Our parents are always watching us, wanting us to be in church or at home. Please, Pastor, can you help us? Clara looked down, her voice barely above a whisper. I know it's not right, but please help us. We just want to be normal teenagers. The pastor was taken aback, surprised by Clara's request. He looked at her with a mixture of concern and understanding. Rita chimed in, Yes, Pastor. We just want to be able to make our own choices and have some freedom. We promise we won't do anything bad. The pastor nodded thoughtfully. I see. Well, let me think about this. I'll need to talk to your parents. Rita chimed in, No, we don't want to involve our parents in this. We just want it to be a little secret between you and us. The pastor's eyes widened in surprise. A little secret, Rita and Clara? They nodded in unison. Yes, it will be a little secret. Please, we have a party to attend this weekend. One of our classmates is celebrating her birthday, and we want you to cover for us. Clara continued, If our parents call and ask if we're in church, just tell them we are. But we'll be attending the party instead. And if they call again and ask why we're not back, you can tell them we're doing a late-night vigil and won't be coming back that day. The pastor's face turned red with shock. God forbid, children of God. This is a sin before God and man. Clara looked at the pastor, her eyes pleading, Yes, Pastor, we know it's a sin, but please help us out. We're adolescents, and this is our time to enjoy our youth. Please help us. The pastor's expression changed, and he smiled. You know, you're the daughters of a rich man. So, what's the deal? Clara and Rita exchanged a surprised glance, not expecting this response from the pastor. Clara spoke up, Sir, we'll give you N100,000 if you can just cover for us and communicate well. And after that, you'll give us your number, so we can call you in case of any issues. The pastor leaned back in his chair, a sly grin spreading across his face. After settling with the pastor, Clara and Rita transferred N100,000 into his account and collected his phone number. The pastor was overjoyed, and as soon as they left his office, he sat alone, thinking to himself, Children of a rich man, look at how they're throwing around N100,000 as if it's loose change. And without wasting any time, they transferred it immediately. Wow, I wish I came from a rich family so I could enjoy myself like this, he chuckled to himself. This is a real business, a real target. If they like, they shouldn't even come to church again, as long as they're giving me N100,000, I'm okay. Life is sweet like this, and I never knew. Wow, this one not cool business. The pastor's eyes sparkled with excitement as he thought about the possibilities. But within a short time, he regained his composure and remembered his role as a pastor. He picked up his Bible and said, Oh God, please forgive me. I'm just looking for my daily bread. Have mercy on me, forgive all our sins. He quoted a verse from the Bible, You say that if we sin against you, you will forgive us. Therefore, I know that I have sinned against you right now. Please find a place in your heart to forgive me, O God of merciful Lord. The pastor dropped his Bible and laughed out loudly to himself. It's just my daily bread that I'm looking for. Clara and Rita were overjoyed that they had successfully convinced the pastor to cover for them. When they got home, they couldn't wait to talk to their parents about their driver. They decided to tell their parents that they didn't want a driver to take them to school or church anymore. As soon as their parents came home that night, Clara and Rita went straight to their bedroom to greet them. Their parents asked about their day, and they told them it was good, that they had just returned from evening service. Their parents were thrilled and praised them for their commitment to attending church. Clara spoke up, "Mom, Dad, there's something we want to talk to you about. It's been bothering us." Their parents asked what it was, and Clara continued, "We don't like our driver taking us to evening mass anymore. Our friends' parents don't take them to church, they use online taxi or ride-hailing services instead." Their father responded, "No, my little angels. As the daughter of a billionaire, I don't want you girls taking ride-hailing services or booking online taxi when we have multiple cars in our compound." Clara and Rita looked at each other, and Rita spoke up, "It's not that we don't understand, Dad, but we want to feel like big girls, even if it's just for a little while." Their father thought for a moment and then said, "Okay, if you insist. But make sure you don't miss church. And I'll be calling the pastor to check if you're attending regularly." Clara and Rita nodded in agreement, and their father continued, "I'll increase your monthly allowance so you can book online taxi and ride-hailing services. Just be sure to stay safe and attend church regularly." Clara and Rita were thrilled and thanked their parents. "Thank you, Mum. Thank you, Dad. We really appreciate it." They joyfully left their parents' bedroom and went to their own room. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson looked at each other, smiling. "Anything for our daughters. As long as they keep going to church." Clara and Rita were so happy that their plan had worked out successfully. The day of the birthday party finally arrived, and they dressed up for church service as usual around 3 p.m. But little did their parents know, they had other plans. As they left for church, they booked a taxi online, and when the driver arrived, they hugged into the vehicle. But instead of going to church, they started changing into their party dresses inside the taxi. The driver was surprised and asked, "Hey, you children, I thought you people were going to church." Clara spoke up, "Please, mind your business and drive us to where we're going." The driver shook his head and said, "Children of these days, they can use church to deceive their parents." Clara and Rita were angry with the driver and told him, "Next time, we're not going to book you again." The driver apologized, saying, "Sorry, it's just that what you people are doing is not good. Your parents might be thinking you're at church, but you're here, putting on party dresses to go to a hotel." Clara and Rita ignored the driver and continued dressing up. After they finished, they dropped off at the hotel where the party was being held. They hugged out of the taxi and went into the party hall. The party was elaborately decorated by their classmates, and they danced, drank, and even tried smoking for the first time. Meanwhile, their parents were worried that they hadn't returned from church service. They called the pastor, who told them that there was a serious prayer session going on and that Clara and Rita would be coming back late. The parents asked if they could pick them up, but the pastor said no, that the prayer session wouldn't allow any distractions. The parents trusted the pastor's words and didn't bother to call Clara and Rita to check on them. But little did they know, Clara and Rita were living it up at the party, doing things they had never done before. As Clara and Rita walked into the living room, their parents looked up at them with a mix of relief and exhaustion. Their mom, beaming with pride, said, "Oh, my brave girls. You're finally back. I was starting to get worried." Clara and Rita exchanged a sheepish glance, trying to hide their guilt. Their mom continued, "I can see you're both tired. You must have had a wonderful time at the prayer meeting." Clara and Rita nodded in unison, trying to keep up the charade. Their mom smiled and said, "In case you need anything to eat or drink, just wake up our house help. She'll prepare something for you guys." Clara and Rita thanked their mom and quickly made their way to their bedroom. As soon as they closed the door behind them, they burst into laughter. "Can you believe Mom?" Clara giggled. Rita chuckled, "I know, right? She has no idea what we've been up to." They both collapsed onto their bed, holding their bellies in laughter. "This is the life!" Clara exclaimed, still chuckling. Rita nodded in agreement, "Definitely. We're living our best lives." As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, Clara and Rita continued to live a life of deception. They would tell their parents they were going to church, but instead, they would sneak off to parties and hang out with friends. They became experts at lying, and their parents never suspected anything. But one day, the pastor called them, his voice sounding urgent over the phone. "Clara and Rita, I need to see you both immediately. It's very important." Clara and Rita exchanged nervous glances. What could they have done to warrant such an urgent call? They quickly got dressed, putting on their Sunday best as if they were actually going to church. But instead of attending a service, they were going to the church to settle their case with the pastor. As they arrived at the church, they went straight to the pastor's office, their hearts racing with anticipation. "Pastor, what's going on?" Clara asked, trying to sound innocent. "Why did you call us here so urgently?" The pastor looked at them with a serious expression, and Clara and Rita knew they were in trouble. The pastor, a sly smile spreading across his face, said, "My dear sisters in the Lord, there is no problem. It's just that I want to tell you people that this business we are doing together, the pay is not enough." Clara and Rita looked at each other, confused. "What do you mean, Pastor?" they asked, their voices laced with skepticism. The pastor cleared his throat, his eyes gleaming with a sinister intent. "My dear Clara and Rita, I'm talking about the money you've been giving me. It's not enough. I need more." Clara and Rita exchanged a nervous glance, unsure of where the conversation was headed. Clara asked, "How much do you want us to increase the money to, Pastor?" The pastor cleared his throat again, a sly grin spreading across his face. "The money you normally bring is for asking God's forgiveness for the sin you've made me commit against him," he said. Clara and Rita exchanged a confused glance. "So, the next thing I want as my own share of the business is for you to give me that thing you have under your skirt." "I'll be very much okay with it." Clara and Rita looked at each other in shock and surprise. "A newism. We never expected this from you," they exclaimed. The pastor's expression turned cold, his eyes gleaming with a sinister intent. "Okay," he said, his voice low and menacing. "If you're not willing to give me what I want, then maybe we shouldn't be doing business together anymore." Clara and Rita felt a chill run down their spines as they realized the pastor's true intentions. Clara and Rita thought for a while, weighing their options. They had grown accustomed to the freedom and luxuries their secret business with the pastor provided. They rationalized that if they could give others what they had under their skirt, then giving it to the pastor wouldn't be difficult. "We'll do it," Clara said finally, turning to the pastor. "We'll give you what you want, but you have to promise to keep it a secret." Rita nodded in agreement. "Yes, Pastor. Please keep this between us." The pastor's face lit up with a sinister grin. "My beautiful sisters in the Lord, I promise to keep it a secret. Nobody will hear about it." He rubbed his hands together, clearly pleased with the agreement. "Now, the deal starts tomorrow." "Tomorrow, I'll have you, Clara." "And the next day, I'll have you, Rita." Clara and Rita nodded reluctantly, feeling a sense of unease wash over them. They left the pastor's office, their minds racing with thoughts of what they had just agreed to. Clara and Rita started giving in to the pastor's demands. Anytime, any day he needs it, reveling in the secret arrangement. He would often say to himself, "Rich man's children are always foolish. They can do anything to get what they want. They're paying me, and at the same time, I'm using them to satisfy myself. What a sweet deal. The pastor continued to live a life of deceit, using Clara and Rita to deceive their parents, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson. He would use them to carry out his nefarious activities, all while making himself feel pleasured. This went on for months, without their parents suspecting anything. The pastor's greed and lust had consumed him, turning him into a master manipulator. Clara and Rita, once innocent and naive, had become pawns in his game of deceit. Their lives were forever changed, entangled in a web of secrets and lies. As time passed, the pastor continued to refuse to use protection while having intercourse with Clara or Rita. Despite their efforts to convince him, he insisted that he enjoyed it more without protection. Clara and Rita had grown accustomed to his ways, but they couldn't shake off the feeling of unease. Outside of their secret arrangement with the pastor, Clara and Rita were meticulous about their health and safety. They never allowed anyone to touch them without using protection, but they made an exception for the pastor. He had assured them that, as a man of God, he was free from any diseases, but one fateful evening, Clara and Rita returned home from church, looking pale and weak. As they greeted their parents, they suddenly felt a sharp pain in their stomachs and rushed to the toilet to vomit. Their parents were shocked and concerned, having never seen their daughters vomit before. They asked Clara and Rita what was wrong, but the sisters insisted they hadn't eaten anything unusual. Their mother decided to take them to the hospital the next morning to check for typhoid or malaria. Clara and Rita went to their bedroom, feeling weak and sleepy, unaware of the shocking revelation that awaited them. The next day, Clara and Rita's mother took them to the hospital, determined to get to the bottom of their mysterious illness. After a series of tests, the doctor finally emerged with a stunned expression. "I'm afraid I have some shocking news," the doctor announced. "Both Clara and Rita are 3 weeks pregnant." Their mother's eyes widened in disbelief. "It's a lie," she exclaimed. "My daughters can't be pregnant. These are the children God has sent to me." The doctor remained calm, explaining that the hospital was a specialist facility and that the tests were accurate. Clara and Rita's mother was stunned, unable to process the news. She turned to her daughters, her voice shaking with anger and shock. "How could this happen? Who got you pregnant? You're supposed to be virgins." Clara and Rita looked at each other, tears streaming down their faces. They knew they had to confess the truth, but they were terrified of their mother's reaction. Their mother's face turned red with rage. "Get up, let's go home. You'll tell me everything. How did you get pregnant?" She dragged them out of the hospital and into the car, speeding home in silence. As soon as they arrived home, Mrs. Thompson rushed to her husband's side, her face pale with worry. "Your 2 precious daughters are pregnant, and they won't tell me who's responsible," she exclaimed. Mr. Thompson's eyes widened in shock. "What? How could this happen? My 2 angels, pregnant? Who got them pregnant?" he thundered, his voice echoing through the house. Clara and Rita broke down in tears, unable to bear their father's anger. Mr. Thompson's face turned red with rage. "If you don't tell me who got you pregnant, I'll cut you off. You know who I am," he shouted. Rita finally spoke up, her voice trembling. "Father, Daddy, please forgive us. We've been deceiving you all this while. We've been working with our pastor." Their mother's eyes widened in shock. "Pastor? What do you mean by working with the pastor?" she asked, her voice laced with confusion. Rita continued, her words spilling out in a rush. "We've been pretending to attend church, but we haven't been going. We've been paying the pastor to tell you we're in church when you call. Sometimes we go to parties, sometimes we see our boyfriends, but they always use protection. We never let them touch us without it." Their father's face turned purple with anger. "Then who touched you without protection? how did you get pregnant? Who put that thing in your stomach? He thundered, his voice echoing through the house. Rita and Clara remained silent, unable to utter another word. Their mother's anger boiled over, and she shouted, "Are you dumb? Can't you talk again?" "Talk before I lose my temper," Clara finally spoke up, her voice trembling. "Daddy, please, we don't know how to say it. It's an abomination before God and man." Their father's face turned red with rage. Abomination? Say that, abomination? We want to hear it." Clara and Rita exchanged a terrified glance. Clara continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Daddy, Mommy, we're sorry. Please forgive us," but their mother was beyond consolation. "It's not forgiveness we're talking about. We want to know the idiot who put that seed in your stomachs." Clara and Rita took a deep breath. And Clara finally spoke up, "Daddy, Mommy, we're sorry. It's our pastor." Mr. and Mrs. Thompson looked at each other in shock, their eyes wide with disbelief. "Our pastor?" they exclaimed in unison. "Which pastor are you talking about?" Rita replied, her voice shaking. "The pastor you normally call on the phone to check if we're in church or not. We worked it out with him. We paid him, and he also satisfied himself with our bodies. We begged him many times to use protection, but he refused, saying he enjoys it more raw." The room fell silent, as if time itself had stopped. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson's faces contorted in shock and horror, and they both fell to the floor, overcome with grief and anger, and broke down in uncontrollable tears. Please subscribe and comment for part 2.